Ask any seasoned driver who frequently tows a trailer or a caravan, and they will all tell you the exact same thing. You need to keep a close eye on your temperatures, exhaust, transmission, and coolant. And right now in Australia, there is no gauge more popular than the ScanGauge 3. It's advertised as a plug-and-play system that provides real-time data with clear and easy-to-use interface. But at $445, is it actually worth your hard-earned money? Does it deliver on accuracy, durability, and reliability? Or are you just paying for the brand name and the marketing hype? What's up everybody, I'm Ayman and welcome back to Bush Business. In this video, I'm going to give you an in-depth review of the ScanGauge 3. I'm going to run you through the installation and the setup process and give you a thorough review on how it actually performed in my Land Cruiser over the last 3,000 kilometers. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share my opinion if this was money well spent or if I wasted my money. Before we get into it, just like all my previous videos, this is not a sponsored review. I paid full price for this unit with my own money, so my opinions and my thoughts are my own with absolutely no influence. So if you do appreciate honest product reviews, please take a second to hit that like and subscribe button for me. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it really helps me out. Let's get stuck straight into business. When you're towing a heavy trailer or a caravan and your tow vehicle is sitting right near its maximum GCM, the last thing you want is to be guessing how your engine and gearbox are coping. Temperatures can take seconds to spike, and the decision to lift off the pedal and pull over to let the vehicle cool down can be the difference between a slight delay in your trip or a very expensive engine replacement and a very long tow home. For this reason, and also to carry out a detailed review of the Just Auto's engine tune while towing, which is linked in the description below for you to watch later, I decided to invest some time and money to look into OBD gauges that will allow me to display and record critical data. Whilst there is no shortage of OBD dongle and app style products that give these readouts, I wanted something that was reliable, proven, and plug and play. I didn't want my phone screen to be on for 10 hours at a time while I'm driving, or lose data visibility every time I get a phone call, so a dedicated gauge with its own display screen was my only choice. From my research, the ScanGauge 3 was the most popular gauge, and despite being the most expensive by far, I dug deep into my pockets and I purchased this one right here. I wanted to see for myself if this gauge is worthy of all the hype that it has been receiving and if it's worth the cost. ScanGauge advertises that this is a completely tool-free plug-and-play product, and to be fair, it is. It uses a suction cup mount for the windscreen and a magnetic base to mount the display on that. Despite the rough ride of the 70 series and some corrugations on off-road work, it has been solid with absolutely no vibrations. To connect the ScanGauge to the car, you simply plug it into the OBD port. For my Land Cruiser, that is just above my left foot underneath the steering column. Plug that wire into the back of the ScanGauge 3 and turn your car on. That is pretty much it from a physical connection. The rest is just setting it up, which we will cover shortly. To tidy up the wiring, I ran the cable from the OBD underneath the steering column and used cable ties to keep it secure against the existing wiring down there. I made sure that the zip ties are put in such a way to take the load off the OBD plug and wire, so it doesn't come loose over time with vibrations, which is a complaint that I have seen other YouTubers raise in their reviews. From the bottom of the dash, I ran the wire to the sides of the window, tucking it away neatly on the gaps between the dash and the firewall. Let's now have a closer look at the user interface and the setup of the ScanGauge 3. The ScanGauge 3 is created to serve two main purposes: as a real-time gauge to display data from the vehicle's ECU and sensors, and as a diagnostics tool to scan and clear any error codes or faults that you may have. For the purpose of this review, we're going to be focusing on using the ScanGauge as a real-time gauge to keep an eye out on important data, simply because I don't have any errors to clear at the moment, and it's not really going to be a great video review if I can't show that. When the ScanGauge is turned on, you're going to see four options on the screen. Scan, this is where you can scan your vehicle for fault codes and clear them. Gauge, this is where you'll be able to view live data such as temperatures, engine loads, and pretty much any data reading that the ECU can provide. Trip, this is the live data specific to your trip and fuel tank, such as runtime, fuel consumption, remaining driving distance, and so on, and more. This is where you're going to find your settings as well as your fuel fill-up input, which we will talk about later on. Before using the ScanGauge 3, it must be set up correctly. And there are three critical aspects of this setup that you must do to get the most out of this tool. These settings are accessed from the main screen by selecting the More option. Here you're going to find Setup, Fill Up, and ScanGauge. The first thing you want to do if you haven't used your ScanGauge 3 before in your car is select the ScanGauge screen and then select Auto Scan and then your vehicle make. This will read the ECU and give you access to additional readings that are specific to your vehicle that might not be displayed in the default gauge readings. Once the scan is complete, I chose Select All because why not? And for the 70 Series 2.8 Land Cruiser, that's going to show me things like my transmission temperatures, torque converter lock status, and many more things. The next screen is your main settings, and that's where we're going to be spending most of our time on. The first tab is your display setting, where you can change the theme colors and how the gauges are displayed. It's all about personal preference in this tab, just do whatever makes you happy. The vehicle tab is very important. Input your engine size, fuel tank capacity, and fuel type. And be sure to do this correctly as it's going to impact your fuel economy and distance readings. The Units tab is where you can select measurement units, miles or kilometers, and so on, depending on where you live and your preference. By default, the ScanGauge 3 shows fuel consumption as kilometers per liter. If you want to change your fuel economy to show as liters per 100 kilometers, be sure to select it in this screen. The Adjust tab is one of the most critical settings. This is where you can calibrate your speedo to get the accurate fuel consumption and range figures. You need to do this as all speedos, even if your vehicle is unmodified, are not true from factory. And this error gap becomes larger when you change your tire diameter. Because of this, if you skip this part, your fuel economy and range will be inaccurate. And you don't want to run out of fuel because you relied on inaccurate figures. For my 79 in specific, I used my Garmin GPS to calibrate the ScanGauge, and my speedo required an adjustment of 7% to be accurate. But I manually set that to 8% to give me a slight buffer to avoid getting a speeding ticket. Because tire size impacts rolling diameter and speed, it's also going to impact the accuracy of your fuel economy display. And this is why in this section you can also adjust your fuel flow, which basically means adjustment to your fuel consumption gauge. This, however, is automatically adjusted for maximum accuracy every time you use the fill up screen. So I wouldn't worry about adjusting that manually for the time being yet. Just be mindful that your consumption is not going to be accurate until you carry out a few fill-ups and input the data using the fill tank screen. You should always use the fuel fill-up screen every time you fill up petrol, and make sure that you key in the right volume and cost of your fuel accurately. That way the system can provide very accurate real-time fuel consumption and range figures. To do this, all you have to do is every time you fill up your petrol, go to the More screen followed by the fill up, and key in your data. Once this is complete, the gauge is going to provide you with a detailed summary that's going to show the data for the previous tank that is very accurate. And it's going to be based on exactly what you put in. It's going to automatically adjust the fuel flow to make your live fuel consumption very accurate. In my case, the ScanGauge calculated that the fuel needed adjustment of 7%. So perhaps fuel adjustment is the same as speed adjustment because they both rely on the speedo and odometer for their calculations. Let's talk about the physical display screen itself now. It is a well-proportioned 4.3-inch touchscreen, and there is no glare or issues with visibility of this screen in the day or night. It's bright enough and visible enough in full sun, and in pitch black it doesn't feel too bright and uncomfortable. I don't think it has automatic dimming, but I don't think it needs it. But if you do need to adjust the brightness on the go, you can just adjust it by using 2 fingers, swiping up and down without entering any specific settings, and that's going to touch the brightness. The touch screen is also responsive, but sometimes does feel that it needs a firm push. Maybe this is built into the display on purpose to avoid accidental touches when you're trying to use the product on bumpy grounds. The screen overall is not impressive by today's standards, but it is adequate and simple enough to be effective for what it's supposed to do. I can't imagine this device being able to handle complex displays like a modern display gauge, which is likely why it's limited to just showing letters and numbers. With the setup done and out of the way, let me show you what I have selected on my gauge and the data that I'm looking at. On the gauge screen, there are 3 pages you can customize. Switching between them can be done very easily by pressing on the numbers down the bottom or simply swiping your finger left and right, which is the easiest thing to do. I have set page 1 to show me my critical temperatures, exhaust gas, coolant, transmission temperatures, as well as my live speedometer. Since the cruiser's speedo is inaccurate due to the 33-inch tires and the GPS doesn't work when I'm in a tunnel, this is very handy so I don't get a speeding ticket. On the subject of the speedo, I did find that the speed display on the ScanGauge bounces up and down by 3 kilometers an hour or so, and this is probably because of how it's outputted the signals from the car itself through the OBD, but it would be nice for ScanGauge to program the speed reading to show a smoothed out live speed as opposed to frantic movement up and down. Page 2 has my battery voltage, air intake temperatures, and anything related to kind of air and intercooler, and page 3 contains my trip data, fuel consumptions, remaining fuel, and estimated distance remaining. To customize these pages, you simply press on the item that you wish to edit and then select the data to replace it from the list on the screen. This is where that data from the ScanGauge is available to you to access. I mainly drive with the display showing page 1 and occasionally like to exit the gauge screen and switch to my trip display. This is so I can have a better look at my trip data, see my fuel consumption, my range estimates, my costs, etc. The trip screen also records your maximum coolant temperature, which is very handy for troubleshooting if your car is going into limp mode. I just wish that you can also record the maximum exhaust gas temperature and transmission temperature, but unfortunately it doesn't. Because timely responsive data is critical, I'm happy to confirm that the live data is accurate and fast. There's absolutely no lag in the data being displayed or the refresh on the screen. As the data is from the vehicle's OBD, which connects straight to its computer, there is no reason not to trust the data. It is accurate. If it's accurate enough for Toyota, it's accurate enough for me. Over the last 8 weeks and 3,000 kilometers, I have had no reliability issues at all with the ScanGauge. It's always turned on when it needed to turn on and turned off when it needed to turn off. Initially, my exhaust gas temperatures didn't display correctly, but at the 4x4 show, the team from Just Autos quickly updated my engine tune file and resolved this problem. This was not related to the ScanGauge 3, it was more so related to the tune file itself, so we can't blame it on this. I have been receiving an occasional vehicle charging system error on the startup, but this error disappears immediately and the diagnostic scan tool hasn't picked up any errors in the car. I believe it's more related to the engine tune as it only started happening after that file was updated and not necessarily related to this ScanGauge or the car itself. I haven't told Just Autos about this error, but I think I eventually will. Other than that, there has been no need to use the ScanGauge as a diagnostic scanner because I don't have any errors to clear. You can set audible alarms on the ScanGauge 3 to warn you when specific temperatures are reached, which is very handy so you don't have to keep looking at the screen. I personally haven't used this feature yet, so I can't give feedback on it. A minor negative that I did find was that the trip data does not save and resets when you do a firmware update. So make sure you don't decide to update your firmware in the middle of a trip in the bush because it's not going to retain any of your consumption figures. But luckily, it does retain all the settings information, including the fuel usage adjustments, so you don't lose that. But you do end up losing your fuel range estimates, trip costs, and maximum recorded temperatures. Not a huge deal given that you're only updating the firmware once in a blue moon, but can be very annoying if you're in the middle of something important. Beyond that and the bouncing speed reading, my only other criticism of the ScanGauge 3 is I believe it should have a small battery built into it. Because the system is powered by the OBD port, you can't turn it on and off as you desire. When the engine is switched off, the ScanGauge switches off and you can't turn it back on without turning the engine on. This means that for this review, I've had to keep the engine running the entire time to shoot the video content. It would be nice if the ScanGauge can power itself, even if it's just for 1 hour after turning the car off, and then it can recharge itself when you start driving from the OBD port. More importantly than the actual gauge itself, I believe that customer service, especially for such an expensive item, should be part of any product review. Products do fail, nothing has 100% success rate, and what makes a good product a great product is how a company resolves customer issues. And whilst the product is so far proving to work exactly as advertised, I did send ScanGauge an email prior to my purchase with some questions, and they haven't acknowledged receiving my email or even replied yet. And this makes me question the quality of their after-sales support team in the event of a problem. Over 8 weeks is a very long time, and to not receive a response is slightly concerning. So I do hope that this unit remains reliable for its warranted period, as I feel like any warranty related issues will be incredibly difficult to resolve with that customer service in mind. Beyond the annoyances I've already mentioned, I do believe that whilst effective and accurate, the display interface does feel outdated and lacking in imagination and innovation. Perhaps simplicity is a good thing and it does match the vibe of the 70 series Land Cruiser because everything there lacks innovation, but it does feel a little bit too simple and it can be better. It would have been amazing to see some logging features, perhaps recording some data to an SD card or some app connectivity to overlay OBD data for better analysis and troubleshooting. In my time, I've seen some amazing OBD data logging that will blow the socks off this ScanGauge tool, for example, Boot Mode 3 in my Supra. But as a minimum, it would be really nice to see some graphs or bars rather than just numbers and letters. And at the price that was paid, I feel like I purchased the ScanGauge 3 purely out of interest to see what all the talk and hype is about, to see why so many people recommend this product. And after buying it, I think it's simply because there is no other popular alternative. I did choose to pay a premium for peace of mind, knowing that this is a proven and reliable product. Perhaps once this channel grows and becomes monetized, it's going to lessen the financial stress and is going to allow me into venturing into the unknown and review products that may or may not work. But at the moment, all the expenses are paid in full out of my personal pocket, therefore limiting my ability to do multi-product reviews. And this brings us to the biggest problem and weakness of the ScanGauge 3. Its lack of innovation, high price point, and poor customer service means that the door is wide open for a new player to come into the market and capture the customer base with a little bit of innovation and features that are now commonplace in most products. A great example of this innovation that I'm talking about, at least from their marketing claims, is the new PVS 70 series head unit. It's advertised as having built-in OBD reader that can give you this live data from the head unit display directly. And given that all this data is driven directly from the ECU, the gauge as a reader is not relevant to the accuracy of the data. It's a simple readout that is easy to match and replicate, and I don't imagine it's going to take much time or cost or effort for a company that's already creating OBD readers to simply identify the specific readings for the Land Cruiser and have it preset in their existing, cheaper, more innovative display, making the ScanGauge 3 redundant. If I was going to set up my 4x4 from scratch tomorrow and I had more time and money, I would look to see if there are other OBD readers that can display the same data, or perhaps even go directly to the PVS head unit and not just get my data readings, but get built-in navigation, better sound, better hands-free phone call quality at the same time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you run a ScanGauge or have you found a better alternative? And do you agree with my review and findings about the ScanGauge? Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.